But, hey, Peter King, why don't you have a conversation with Phil Boyle, your long-term friend and colleague out there? Can I read this letter that he wrote to Steve Ballone, who you defended and said, Steve Ballone would have nothing to do with this, the county executive. By the way, this involves Democrats and Republicans because Steve Ballone is a Democrat. Let me read this letter here. And this is directly to Steve Ballone from Phil Boyle, State Senator, 4th District. Steve, on January 1st, 2012, you appointed then Sergeant James Burke to the position of Chief of Department of the Suffolk County Police Department, despite his extensive personal file highlighting his lack of fitness for such a critical position. Almost as soon as Police Chief Burke was elevated to this role, he began efforts to remove federal law enforcement officials from providing much-needed assistance in the murder investigation of at least 10 victims of the Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killers. Your former police commissioner and former FBI agent, Geraldine Hart. Hey, George V., I hope you're listening. The woman that you said, well, she was former FBI, she was working with her. Have your arguments with Phil Boyle, former state senator, who said, quote, unquote, Geraldine Hart has commented that Chief Burke's efforts to remove the FBI from the investigation hurt the efforts to apprehend the killer or killers. So all the very people that George V., the FBI director, marched out to slander me. Oh, you can't slander me. I'm a well-known public figure. He blasphemed me. Okay, how about that? And then Peter King. Is Phil Boyle, the former state senator, lying? He goes on to write, significantly, removing the FBI from the investigation into these brutal murders was the very same action for which you later demanded that then Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spoda resign from office. But not Burke. Why so protective of Burke, Ballone? Further, during a recent interview that you did, you, Steve Ballone, stated that you came to understand that your police chief, James Burke, was a sociopath. When you came to that realization, why did you not immediately fire Burke from his position as your top law enforcement official and relieve him of his command? So Steve Ballone acknowledged in an interview, hey, Steve, I got the tape, right? I'm going to get the tape. You called your police chief a sociopath, and yet you kept him on. Why? Because he knew too much, right? So, State Senator Boyle, again, a Republican conservative, I'm sure that Peter King has nothing but nice things to say about former State Senator Boyle. I'm sure Steve Ballone has nothing but nice things to say. But this letter went to Steve Ballone. I, along with countless residents of Suffolk County, New York State, and the rest of the country, demand to know why you consistently promoted, enabled, and protected James Burke despite undeniable evidence that he was a dangerous individual. Your decision to retain James Burke as chief for years provided him with the continued power and authority to retaliate and punish any of those in his department who questioned or challenged him. That was a monumental mistake on your part for which Suffolk County residents are still paying. Can we get Steve Ballone? I know he came on with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby. Can we get him on again to defend his honor, to say that he didn't call his police chief at the time a sociopath, to demean, not what Curtis Lee was saying, I'm just a messenger. I'm reading the letter that went to him. By the way, he also called for a special prosecutor from Tish James's office, Attorney General, and you know what? Naturally, the guy's name wasn't Trump, so she wasn't going to investigate anybody. Finally, boy, this guy goes on and on. He loves to write letters here. This is a well-written letter, Phil Boyle, State Senator, 4th District. Finally, Steve Ballone, Chief Burke has been indicated as a suspect by a sex worker going by the name of Leanne, who encountered Burke at parties at the community of Oak Beach, the gated community, in the period before you appointed him as your police chief, when he was a sergeant. He was going in there and he was dragging prostitutes around, according to Leanne. His thing was to drag them around on the ground by their hair and then have rough sex with them. These parties involve prostitution and significant amounts of illegal drug use. The reports mention as an attendee, now get this, take note of this, Justin, because this is where we're going next. State Senator Boyle says reports mention as an attendee or even a host of these parties at Oak Beach, an individual with close ties to the highest levels of Suffolk County government. Now, why are they blaming me? I'm just reading all this from State Senator Boyle. Can we put State Senator Boyle in the witness protection program? Can we make sure that he's serving Slurpees, in Laramie, Wyoming, with a different name and identification? It's not me, guys. It's not me, George V. I'm just a messenger. It's not me, Peter King. Why don't you have a conversation with your colleague for years, Phil Boyd, Republican conservative that you admired, and rightfully so. My last question is whether you have any close friends, remember he's writing to Steve Malone, or associates who live in the small community of Oak Beach who might have witnessed Chief Burke at any of these parties. Of course he has friends. Because guess who was seen at Oak Beach? Steve Malone. Yeah, I said it. When he writes that, right? Again, I'm gonna read it. The reports mention as an attendee or even a host of these parties an individual with close ties to the highest levels of Suffolk County government. Well, who do you think he's implicating? Seems to me he's implicating Steve Malone, huh? My last question is whether you have any close friends or associates who live in the small community of Oak Beach who might have witnessed Chief Burke at any of these parties. If this individual or individuals had conveyed to you that then Sergeant Burke attended any of these parties, it would have provided even further proof that Burke was absolutely not the right person to be elevated to chief of department. I think we could all agree, Lou, I think, Justin, we can all agree that this guy should never have been made the police chief, right? He was a scumbag as a sergeant in the department. And then when this guy steals his duffel bag when he's police chief, and in the duffel bag he has snuff films, and bondage materials, and whips from S&M, sadomasochistic endeavors, and all kinds of sordid items you use in rough sex. What did Chief Burke do? He went into the 4th precinct. He takes the guy into the back room, and he almost killed him. And he ordered everybody to cover it up. Eventually, word surfaced. He went on federal trial. He was found guilty of violating this guy's civil rights, obstruction of government information, and intimidating witnesses. And then who covered up for him? The DA, Spoda. And his integrity chief, the ADA McPartland, they also went to jail for that very same thing, intimidating witnesses and obstruction of governmental investigations. Scumbags, all of them. So I like Peter King to tell me what great. Maybe next is Spoda and McPartland. By the way, the Conservative Party chairman, Walsh, also went to jail at that time. Next, I'm going to tell you a story about him. So say what you want about Curtis Sliwa. You can impugn me. You can call me a liar. You can say that I'm making it all up. There is nothing I have presented today that came from me. It came from Tierney, who said the FBI was not involved in the investigation until recently, when he came on board a year ago. And the fact that we have State Senator Phil Boyle, who represented the area, a Republican conservative, attacking Steve Malone. And all that Peter King could say was nice things about all these people. Yeah, really? How come no mention of State Senator Phil Boyle? Hey, Phil, if I were you, I would see going into the witness protection program real quick.